Oh, and welcome back to Coffee with Andreas, where I'll be just drinking coffee today with you and hopefully, no, definitely with a guest. Carlotta Costa is joining us, our director of ESG, who's going to tell us about her experience on the ground and behind the scenes of how we built the ESG Compass and how it has become so valuable, not only for us as a company, but for our customers. But before we meet Carlotta, let's have a zip and oh yeah, updates. Let me give you some updates. Mm, One big update out of Uganda. We've achieved the next step to move beyond our pilots there in Uganda, approved by the government of Uganda as one of only 5 national traceability providers for coffee. So that kind of institutional positioning turns traceability and our dashboards into the evidence that the buyers out of Uganda require. Big major update from our carbon project in Mexico as well, where we are now advancing the project with a major methodology upgrade, shifting from a conservative listing to a more government stakeholder and community approach. So this transition from the methodology strengthens the credit quality and improves the buyer confidence. And that's where we can optimize not only the output of credits through the methodology, like we're optimizing by about 40 to 50%, but also the potential price shift of these credits will increase by 20 to 30% through that new methodology. So much more impact on the ground there in Mexico. Côte d'Ivoire, another exciting development. One of the major exporters out of Côte d'Ivoire of cocoa has joined the ranks of partnering with us, and we have analyzed the first 200 tons of cocoa for them that is shipping to Europe with deforestation reports, and we're expecting to ship about 30,000 tons this year with this customer. And of course, Kenya, our front runner in digitization of coffee and other crops, one to be announced soon. We're diving deep into the ESG methodology and themes and standards with the NAKU Cooperative Union. Um, and we will tell you more from Kenya in the coming weeks. But now let's meet Carlotta. And today I'm so happy to invite another special guest out of our core team from Dimitra into my kitchen for a cup of coffee. Carlotta Costa, our director of ESG, who's been working tirelessly with our team to build what is now called the ESG Compass. Over the last 2 years, we've diligently developed a platform that we might take a little peek into it. But what we want to peek into today is who is Carlotta Costa and how did she end up here today? Hi, Carlotta.
Hello, Andreas. Glad to be here having a chat with you.
Yes, as we have many chats throughout the week and the months since we met. Um, what is this chat about? Well, we want to meet you. We want to understand who you are, why ESG, why Dimitra. And let's dive in with a very specific Dimitra question. What's in your cup today?
What is it in here? I'd say tea. I love tea.
Oh, so you're coming to a coffee with Andreas with a cup of tea. It's like coming with a knife to a gunfight, I think.
Not necessarily love coffee in the morning, early morning, and then I switch to tea. They're both equally delicious, right?
They are. And when it comes to tea, do you have a special tea story for us? Any magical moment that you can remember for yourself tasting a special tea or being on a tea farm, maybe even? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Japan. I lived in Japan, and I really love the peculiar taste that those leaves have because you can feel. not only the passion of the farmers, but really the attention to details that they put in the growing of it, in the tending to it, more than processing, really. And I think you can really flavor that in tea ceremonies in Japan because it's a ritual, right? Like coffee can be for everybody in the morning.
Yes, yes, indeed, and it is a little more subtle, that tea ceremony, than when you think of a tea ceremony, or a coffee ceremony. I think of some of the best espressi that I've had at the train station in Milano, where the machine is always hot and always running, so you get, the best shot of espresso. It's a ritual, you're right. How do we keep going? How do we, um, experience the drink that so much went into? So, um, you've been with us for a while, and you've worked across languages and regions, but how did you end up here? How did your own journey end up lead to sustainability and Dimitra? Can you tell us that?
Well, it's a long journey, so I'll try to summarize it. But I was studying and I got to appreciate the complexity of this world through the lenses of politics and economics for the most. And there I started hearing this thinking about sustainability, right? Like, how do you interconnect these themes and understanding so to create a thriving future for society and the planet? So I got more and more curious. And then after my studies, I've been traveling to developing countries for the most. And I really felt that living in Europe, we have such a privilege in a certain way, whereby we get to consume all of these goods on a daily basis, which are not necessarily produced here for the most. Like the average diet for a European would be bananas, coffees, teas, and they tend to not grow in Europe. There are exceptions, of course, so I got curious about like how can we consume all of this in a sustainable manner when these commodities are not even produced here. So I started delving deeper into sustainability and the interplay with politics and economics, of course, because they do play a role. And I found myself in this niche whereby I thought, technology can actually help with all of this, right? And as I was working on my ikigai, that is your life mission, I figured out that I really was craving to know more on how technology could help, enhancing that kind of future that I wanted to see shining during my studies. So I got just passionate about traceability, namely where the food is coming from, and I got a few different jobs and projects in this field, and they led me to agri-food. So I learned that building technological solutions for this sector was really rewarding, as you see technology being used by multiple players, by multiple users, right? Um, and to me, personally, it's important to have a positive impact. And I think with technology, the scalability of it, you can really have that. So then I dig deeper and deeper into like, what is sustainability? Is it about compliance? Is it about risks? What is it about? And how do you build tools, technical tools, to help people with that kind of sustainable future that we want to build together? So I'll keep it brief, but that's a bit of a long
Well,
story.
that's the pleasure always with you, that we can dive deep on any of these ES or Gs or subject matter around it, and can have a philosophical discussion almost around it. So let's focus in a little bit on not what your goal is, but who are you and how did you end up at Dimitra? What made it clear for you that Dimitra is approaching ESG in a different way?
Well, maybe you are contributing to that. As in, I remember we had an informal conversation over ramen, if I'm not mistaken, in Berlin. Um, and we were talking about this, like the vision of, where all of this is leading us towards, because it really touches everybody. We all ate, we want to secure our foods in the future, and we care about how people are treated in the process, right? So I think it started off as a humane conversation about food and the future of food, and you talked about Dimitra, and I was fascinated because you have such a presence, or we have now, thanks to you, a presence globally, as in every region has people on the ground, which I really value because having built technological solutions in the past, I also understand that they are only successful when they're really being used by people who understand the cultural context, right? The politics and economics I was talking about before, it's really important. So I think having local presence was one of the things that fascinated me about Dimitra, and also having this all-in-one ecosystem, right? Because we have different apps, and I think it's very important that as supply chains are very siloed already when it comes to actors, data formats, any kind of things, it's important to have one single source of truth, if you want, that can capture it all, right? And I really saw this in the Mitra. And lastly, I think I was fascinated by just the people making the Mitra, because an organization is just, the value of its components. So I guess you were part of it, yes.
Thank
Mhm.
you. That is very kind. I think back to that ramen place in Berlin often. And yes, that was a clear moment of connection over something bigger than just ESG or just technology. It was, how do we reach a critical mass of users, right? Because any piece of technology can be great in and of itself, but if you don't get it to adoption, then you're going to be challenged to really make an impact with it. And that's where I agree. It starts with the people, and meeting you already in person, which is not so normal for a virtual company, right? If you, I'm traveling around the world every day, but I got to meet in person a few times already, in Berlin, in Hong Kong, in and around the world, and I'd love to now get you to also show some of Carlotta to our audience, because we know you know ESG. We don't know it that well, right? So I and you and I have talked about that. How do we bring it down to the tangible, right? What is tangible? And ESG is usually thought of as in paperwork, uh, and lots of reports and new reports and over again. But from your perspective, what is ESG outside of the reports and the paperwork? And why is it now so urgent and unavoidable?
I cannot give very long answers, right? No S's here, but I'll try to keep it brief. I think it's just a way to secure our futures, whether we are part of the food system as in working for it or actually using it. Because ESG stands for environment, social, and governance, right? So it's just a way at looking at how we can build that future, a thriving future. And I think it gets very abstract and it gets very burdened in these workloads or reports and everything. But people shouldn't be scared of it because to me, ESG is simply a way to measure success and to enable a company to be profitable in the longer term. So if we want to break it down a bit more, we have how we care about the planet, which seems abstract, but we do tap into it every day of our lives. We drink water, don't we? So we want to ensure that that water stays good. When I open the tap, I'm in my kitchen at the moment, actually. So I just looked at the tap. I think that someone is there to actually supply me with water, right? It's their job. So there are workforce behind every action that we take on a daily basis. And then the governance aspect of it is, of course, how do we tie all of that management together? I wouldn't get water here if there wouldn't be, organizations managing it, basically.
So for you, just to dig into that a little bit, because you're talking about your awareness of it. Are you constantly aware of it, or is it moments where you take time again out of your day? Is it that constant awareness that you carry within you?
I think I try to. I mean, I do meditate and that helps. But for instance, when I eat, I try just being with the food, right? And thanking for the food, not necessarily to gods or entities, but simply to all the resources that went into it, into the sunshine, into the earth that made it grow, the farmers that enabled for that miracle from seed to plant to happen, and then also all the people that managed to bringing it to me.
I love that image of really, while you're consuming, um, th- being thankful for the supply chain that brought it to you, right? And the supply chain actors. And of course, then we can become more spiritual at the end of that journey. But the just staying here with 2 feet on the ground, thinking about these things can help. I agree with you. Bringing it from an abstract ESG um, idea to something tangible. And can you tell us what changes in, well, you've worked with lots of our customers, especially in the on the Abrafrutas case. Have you noticed what changes when ESG becomes more tangible through data?
Yes, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we need to consider that we're talking to producers, right? To farmers. So I am not talking to the chief sustainability officers of Nestle, which understands completely all the frameworks and all the jargon and the difficult parts of the theory, if you want. But I'm talking to the practical people who actually have to deal with those practices. So I think once we can digitize supply chains, value emerges out of it, and this means for producers to actually keep track of what they're doing in the field and being able maybe to communicate it with their end consumers. So in the case of Abrafrutas, I still remember the producers telling us, yes, we want to do the ESG program with you, but we have so many certificates right now. And the fact that we have Global Gap or Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance, and I could keep going. And they're like, it feels as if it's never enough. But I said, you are already doing well, right? So we want to highlight that. And how do you do that? By collecting the data and showcasing it, right?
And those first steps then make sense to them because they're collecting the data already, but they're then giving it away to the app that their certifier sent them, maybe. That was an opening eye moment for a producer that I talked to here in Berlin when at the Fruit Logistica. I said, Where are you sending the data? How are they, meaning the certifier, collecting the data?" And he said, "Oh, they send us this great questionnaire in this app, and then I just hit send, and then it's done." I said, "Yeah, but where's the data?" "Well, it's sent, and I have a certification for 1 year." I said, "Yes, exactly. But your certifier has your data and not you. So here's an opportunity to do this both, right? To collect it and hit send to appease the need for data from the certifier, to appease the need for data from a registration point of view, and so on and so on." So I agree. That's when the first eye-opening moments come, when they see, right, I'm just collecting bit by bit for myself now. Fun. Well, we could talk for hours just about that, but moving us forward in our thoughts, when I was prepping for our talk, I was wondering, where do you see that first value really materialize in your work for the farmer, right? Is it in compliance? Is that the main focus? Is it capital access? Is it risk mitigation or productivity? Where do you see the first real value impact?
I think it depends to whom you're talking. For the most, when we are addressing people, for instance, in the global south exporting to Europe, just giving an example, they're very preoccupied with showing the European buyers transparency over the claims that they make, or indeed meeting compliance requirements, right? So I guess the motivations can be different, but at the end of the day, you could summarize them as the compliance, of course, and it's not only towards regulations, it's also towards standards, right? Because end markets, at the end of the day, they want to be profitable, right? So they need to understand how to survive economically. And that means showcasing with accountability how they're doing things. So it's not only about the regulation, it can also about being safety or hygiene standards. So all of that data fuels into showing how they're doing things well, right? Transparently. And then I think as a byproduct, you can identify risks when you digitize. Because as long as you have all sheets of paper and your information are scattered all over the place because you have very different people in your supply chain managing them, you're always losing bits and pieces. Whereas if you have digitization over the whole supply chain and all the actors working together, you can actually mitigate risks when they arise or identify them before they do, such as climate change risks, right? If you don't have water, you can't produce in 10 years in that, given plantation, for instance. So I think these are the two major clusters of reasons why I think ESG brings really value at first. And lastly is what you mentioned briefly, that is also the capital allocation. I mean, we see more and more that investment funds, stakeholders really want to have verifiability over the investments that they make in terms of returns, and sustainability ESG is focal point of it.
Right. That's the one end of, let's say, the destination view of the produce, that we need more data. But you mentioned something that I want to highlight a little bit. You said when the whole organization collects data, then, but the reality of things is that we're getting started with the customer first and getting their producers to participate in collecting data. So my question there is, how has communication of ESG changed for you over the last 2 years to also speak directly to producers that need to get started?
Big question. I think that we tend to be, as professionals in sustainability, a bit up in the ivory tower, as you would say, as in we understand the theory, it's our daily language, right? But then you cannot speak Arabic to a person who doesn't speak Arabic. And I think talking about this very high level kind of theory based sustainability jargon with the farmer just doesn't work because they are preoccupied, of course, with getting at the end of the month, having, you know, ends meet. So they don't necessarily care about the latest European regulation on deforestation. However, if you can simplify that to make them understand and resonate where they are, so taking really them by the hand in a way, I think there the magic happens because they understand it. I mean, logically, sustainability makes sense. You just need to ensure that across regions, across cultures, and across the supply chain itself. Because if I speak to farmers, it's gonna probably be different than if I speak to an exporter, right? So I think us as professionals have this challenge on a daily basis. That is really how do you shape and form what you're trying to get across in building a thriving future to the person you're talking to.
And at the end of the day, we also realize that a lot of good, sustainable things are already done or
Absolutely.
being done. I mean, it's the beginning is getting the status quo documented, correct? Making it simple for the producer slash farmer team to capture that data. That's where the idea of the ESG Compass started. So, and when you look at the first discussions around the product, how you envision it, how John envisioned it, how Diego envisioned it, how Ramina and the team envisioned it, what evolved from that first abstract project development talk to now where we are in the real world, asking real questions, collecting real data? What has changed?
I think In my experience, at least, the co-designing process became much more important, and that means working together with the users, right? So one thing is to build the technical solution up there in the ivory tower and saying, from tomorrow, you're gonna have to use this. And the users will be just, okay, sure, I have to do it, but I don't know how to do it. This is not for me.
And when you say I don't know how to do it, what problem exactly were you trying to solve when you first started the Compass? Maybe that's the more specific question. What were you trying to solve?
I think the digitization challenge. I mean, getting all together to decide in a supply chain that we need for this data to communicate across stages and to have it all in one single source of truth so that people can access it more easily, if that makes sense.
The single source of truth makes a lot of sense. I mean, that is by far the most important realization for our customers to have. You, we're giving you a place to put your data so that you can look at it whenever you need it, that you can repurpose it whenever you need it so you don't have to look for it again. That's one thing. And the single source of truth will reveal more value as it grows, right? The more data we add there. So we can go so complex, and you're right. The ivory tower is then the abstractness of it. But how do we simplify something so complex without losing credibility, right? In all directions. So when you start with the idea of digitization and you've built an amazing product that is now quite complex in its application, how do you simplify it for the user? What is your step there?
I think before simplifying it was really listening, understanding what the needs of the client, in this case, was Abrafrutas, were and where they wanted to get to. So if you don't listen, you cannot deliver on something people need, right? So I think listening first and then tailoring it as a product according to these needs mean to have it very customizable. So as we know, sustainability can have very different phases and forms, and digitization helps to take it from the abstract to the concrete. But you also need to know how you're going to manage that data, how you're going to collect that data, right? And I think that is where our team was brilliant as to build something that is completely tailored to where the needs of the markets are. Because as I said before, if I'm talking to producer in the global south, I might be talking and needing something different than if I'm talking to an exporter or importer into the EU, right? So I think the ESG Compass then came about as this tool that can be tailored according to needs and wants. Flexibility is key, I think, in this case.
Yes, agreed. Everybody has different challenges and different drivers towards their goals. And when you, well, maybe that's also a vision question. When you look at the ESG compass working properly in an organization, what shifts inside that organization? What do you see?
Values created, that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? Because if you cannot see risks, you cannot mitigate them. That's what I like to see. So if you cannot, how would I put this, get everybody on board, you're not going to be able to see what everybody's doing on your supply chains, right? So the first step is really to get everybody on the same line of embarking on a digitization journey, which means you have been writing these things on paper. Tomorrow you can enter them on the desktop with our apps or platforms. You cannot access a computer, fair point. You can have a mobile app. You don't have internet because that's also the case in remote places for farmers, for instance. We have a way of syncing so that when you get, or syncing maybe it's too technical, but a way for the mobile app on your phone to actually store the data and then transmit it when you get to an internet point.
Was there a moment on the ground for you when you were traveling into the different nations that you've traveled through that made ESG feel less corporate and more human?
Absolutely. More than one time, I think. But I was lucky enough to be a farmer myself for a while. I was on a permaculture farm in Brazil, in the middle of the mountains where there is no coverage. So, first of all, no internet unless you have Starlink. And it felt much more on the ground because I could see the sustainable practices that they were doing, such as agroforestry. So basically, you have lines, rows of coffee being planted, but you also have banana trees so that you can have edibles out of it. Yam, that is like a root that it can also be eaten. And they were also planting in the same rows eucalyptus and other woods for burning, for construction, etc. So it felt like they were doing it right, so that I could go from the corporate working on the laptop in the afternoon to then going hands in the dirt in the morning at 5 to actually understand processes, right? And I think I could see ESG in action. It was caring for the environment, so tending to the soil health, ensuring that carbon is sequestrated so that we have more flourishing environments, biodiversity. There were animals on the farm as well. And the social aspect of it was also very tangible. So all the workers were treated really well, of course. They lived there as well. And they could earn an extra income with the different projects that they were doing in sustainability. And above all, there was this governance layer, if you want, that is from the organizers of the community, where you could see really how organization and transparency across the different teams could lead to a successful living together, right? Because yes, it was a permaculture farm, but it was also a bioconstruct site so that they have, building schools and infrastructures, etc. So you have to coordinate teams in a certain way. And there the governance layer came up as well.
It's fascinating to me how, with this example and your previous mentioning of thinking of the water and where it comes from out of your tap, you're truly living this, and that's what makes it so enjoyable to work with you, because every step, be it technology or the translation of it uh, through training, for you it matters so deeply. And yeah, thank you for that, for bringing all that passion and that true understanding of what it means to be a farmer on the ground. And when you think of your previous life before you went into this profession, do you have a farmer story? Have you have you been in touch with with farming? Have you grown food? Where does this come from? This awareness and this hunger for knowledge, I guess.
I mean, I guess getting my hands in the dirt wasn't my favorite sport when I was growing up, but my mom put me to it. When I would visit her in Sweden, she would be like, "Can you go get me some potatoes in the garden, or tend to the things that we had?" And I actually liked that we could produce and eat from the same ground. So I think I liked it afterwards better than I did when I was a teenager. So she planted the seeds in a certain way, but afterwards, I think my passion came really from eating. I love eating. I love food. I worship food, I think. I'm a foodie. So going from, fine dining to grandma's restaurant, I'm just very fascinated about how does the flavor basically is the creation of a miracle that happens many steps before, where a lot of people are involved. And so from there, I started digging deeper into like how does this work and how can I contribute to it.
And I guess that's a good bridge towards Abrafutas. Why is this a good bridge? Because I just met them again here in Berlin. Them means Abrafutas as an association and their members, and they create this beautiful stand of Brazil. Let's meet Brazil. Let's experience Brazil. And it's that food or that flavor explosion that you get when you try their mangoes, their papaya, their well, any avocados, amazing avocados that they brought, melons, and so on, and they bring that experience, and the people that we work with there at Abrafutos, and that's the bridge now. um, you connected to them very deeply because you built this product with a lot of their feedback and so on. How is Abrafrutas now a strong example for ESG creating true business value and not just compliance?
Well, the flavor that you talked about, I also experienced it, right? Both when I was in Brazil, but also in Europe at different fairs. And I think, as I said, also when you go to restaurant, right, the flavor is just the containment or the final byproduct of all the actions that took place before it. So I think that in the case of Frutas, the creation of value was really to communicate that to an end consumer such as us eating the mangoes, right? Of course, it tastes delicious, but there is a reason why, if not multiple reasons. So I guess the value for them was really to concretely see how, by collecting and processing those information from the field and the supply chain, then they can communicate it when the fruit, in this case, comes to Europe, for instance.
How does consolidating scattered certifications and data into one auditable source change how companies operate? On on a clear example like Abrafrutas.
When we talk about certificates, we know that there is a lot of information going into those, right? The problem I would say is that this information is generally siloed. So schemes tend to look at specific things, whereas ESG generally looks at everything. So once you can put together all of this scatter information into, again, a single source of truth, what happens is that first you can communicate the value better to your consumers, to your even suppliers, whomever asks for it. It can be stakeholders, investors, and the like. But then what also happens is that all of a sudden, once you have digitized all of those processes, it the magic of time efficiency takes place because you don't have to manually scramble all together because the latest buyer asks you for something, or you can see, as I said before, the risks, right? If you have all of this data together aggregated, you can see, for instance, that there is water scarcity in a given region, so you know that within 2 years you're going to have to take action there, otherwise you cannot supply your buyers anymore. So I think the oversight that happens as a byproduct when you digitize all of these certificates is really helpful in, of
Mhm.
course, avoiding costs, but also enhancing profitability at the same time.
I'm still stuck a little bit in my thoughts around where do they start, right? Where does it change a company from not focusing on ESG to having an ESG strategy? It starts with collecting data. It starts with realizing what other values can be brought through the data, right? By reanalyzing it, by building a brand around it, like the ESG seal. So all those things are quite important. But when it comes down to the basic difference between somebody that is already or a company that is already working on ESG with a focus versus another entity that doesn't, what's the main difference that you see? Is it awareness of not of the ESG subject matter? Is it awareness of that or of the needs and value to go digital and digitize their supply chains? What do you see in aha moments when you talk about it?
I guess first and foremost, as a just rule of thumb, we're humans, right? So we need to understand something before we can take action, generally. Then people might take action without understanding it as well. We hope not, but it happens. So I think first and foremost, understanding why they should go digital is important, what the benefits of it are, and then understanding the how to. So these are the three major steps that need to be taken, in my opinion. And then what is a deal breaker is motivation. Because if you do not want it, you're not going to do it. Right. So the motivation, for instance, of Abrafutas to be a forerunner in what they're doing in Latin America was also what led them to be such a big organization adopting a complex ESG program, if you want, that was breaking into smaller steps that are more easily achievable, right? So I think understanding and motivation are definitely at the forefront of why people would want to embark on this digitization journey.
And as a final question of today, because we'll meet you again in my kitchen for a coffee and a tea and a talk. Um, if our partners are watching this now, our internal team and our partners out there, what do you think they can be proud of what we've already achieved so far with the ESG Compass?
I think they can really be proud of what we built together because we have local knowledge that fuels into it. But the design and development teams should really be proud of something that we coordinated, that ended up being a completely customizable and modular product that can actually reflect what's needed in the market. And we got a lot of positive feedback from dozens of potential clients that really see the value of what we built because it's structured, it helps. And it's a compass. It helps you navigate rough waters, right? That was the whole idea. It's really helped to be your co pilot if you want. So I guess that's a big success.
It is. I agree, Carlotta. And I want to thank you for being our pilot in that rough ESG water and creating not only a life raft, but a whole platform of functionality around ESG that can make it easier for our customers to get it done or get started wherever they are in that journey. So thank you for that. Always a pleasure to speak with you, to dive deep into certain aspects of it. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you again in a few weeks when I'm sure you'll tell us more about why you have tea in your cup rather than coffee.
Will do. Thank you. I love sailing. So I'll tell you more about my adventures.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carlotta. I'll see you
Thank you
soon.
for having me.
Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.